Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone joining today. Thank you for taking part in our second part of this three-part series on employer branding. We're going to be talking today about crafting your messaging and creating your content around your employer branding. This is, again, part 2 in a three-part series, but don't worry if you didn't join part 1. We're going to have a discussion that can totally stand on its own. So if you're just joining, it looks like people are still trickling in. We're going to take a minute to kick off, but this is our second episode in kind of a three-part series on employer branding. We're talking content creation and messaging today, and please remember that this is a discussion. This is not us lecturing to you, so please start to think about your questions, your notes, any thoughts you might have or want to bring up or want us to discuss during the next hour. So just start to think about your questions as we wait. All right, let's give it one more minute here. But if everyone is just tuning in here, we're about to talk about messaging, content creation for your employer brand. Building off of our discussion last week on the discovery phase of your employer brand and how to cement that brand. So we're diving into kind of the next step in that process. And please start thinking about any questions you may have or any thoughts that you want us to think about during this discussion. All right, let's just give one more minute for people to join and then we'll kick off.
Hey, Adrian, it looks like somebody has their hand raised. I don't know if that's a mistake.
I see that. Let's see. Tammy.
Oh, we're calling out Tammy. Oh, wow. This is getting brutal already.
Hi, Tammy.
I'm going to ask for a show of hands later, so I want to make sure it's...
Yeah. I think, Tammy, that you're allowed to chat. Let me just make sure here. Yeah, everyone is allowed to chat. So if you have any specific questions, just feel free to drop them into the chat, okay?
I'm lowering my hand in shame.
Awesome. So one more time before we kick off, thank you for joining. We're talking about messaging and content creation for your employer brand today. Please feel free to drop any questions into the chat as we discuss. We'll try and get to them all. And I'm going to pass this off to Lori to kick it off.
Thank you, Adrian. Welcome all. Thank you so much for joining Comeet's our third episode in our talent strategy webinars. We're doing this every week on Thursdays at noon. And this is the second part of our three-part series on employer brand. Like Adrian mentioned, our first part of the employer brand series last week was around discovery and understanding your company culture and really extracting who you are as a company and who you want to be as a company. And don't worry if you were not able to attend last week, we do have all of the recordings posted on our website. Adrian will pop that into the chat so you can access past recordings of these episodes. So thank you again for joining. I'm here with James Ellis from Universum and Rafael Marcus, who works for RBM Consulting. And I want to just give you a quick intro for myself, and then I'll pass it off to them to intro. I'm Lori Golden. I am head of Comeet Elastic Recruiting. And I have about 22 years experience in talent acquisition, recruiting, and all facets of fast growth scaling. So again, welcome. And James, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm James Ellis, Employer Brand Director at Universum. I am the Employer Brand Nerd. I know that because if you Google Employer Brand Nerd, I'm anywhere from 4 to 7 of the first page responses. So if Google says it's the thing, it must be true. We all know that to be the case. So I've got a podcast called The Talent Cast. I have a weekly newsletter called Employer Brand Headlines. All I do is think about employer brand. So I can't wait to talk about, employer brand? Hold on, I'm in the wrong webinar. I got to go by. It's going to be like this for the hour, folks. So enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, James. I think we all need a laugh nowadays. Raf, go ahead.
Hey everybody, I'm Rafael Marcus. I run my own consultancy, and before that I worked at LinkedIn for a few years, basically building and selling employer brand strategy to LinkedIn's clients. with the sales team. And after that, I led employer branding for the, I think technically, officially, with Lori in the same company, the fastest growing software enterprise company ever, UiPath, which is a RPA company. And after that, I decided, having the client side and the more expertise side or the sales side, I had both sides. So why not create my own consultancy and help companies, help more companies than just one. And I'm clearly a James Ellis fanboy because I copied his haircut recently.
It's only brunette women and bald men. Here we are. Welcome to the panel.
Thanks, Jim. Did we lose Lori?
We lost Lori.
We lost Lori. Lori, I think that you had your cell phone, if you can hear us, on, so you can do audio. And while she's
if we don't get her, do you want to just read some questions off the...
Yeah. I was going to say, so while we wait for Lori to come back on, maybe we can kick it off with messaging, right? So we had talked about the discovery phase of cementing your employer brand last week, and kind of one of the next steps once that discovery is completed is crafting your messaging. So how do you get started doing that, and how do you approach the process?
James, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, employer brand is one of those things where everybody kind of walks in with their own framework of thought, right? Employer brand is so vague and conceptual and abstract. And it's some people think your brand is your culture, or your pillars are your culture. Some people think it's your values. Some people think it's the stuff on the news. Some people think it's the stuff you say in Glassdoor. Everybody has a different sense of this thing that we call employer brand. So let's start with some very basic definitions. So the employer brand is what everybody thinks it's like to work for you, based on all the experience, all the touch points. And you got great customer service, that's an impact. You got your CFOs in the news for grabbing somebody else's butt, that's going to impact. You have recruiters who spam the heck out of everybody, that's going to impact it. Your hire manager stares at the phone during the interview, that's going to impact. So it's everything. It's all this stuff. So once you kind of distill that into an understanding of this is what makes us specifically us, makes us unique, what makes us real, that is not, let's call it table stakes marketing. For example, I love seeing advertisements for hospitals where they say, we care about our patients. I'm like, well, isn't that the job? I mean, is there a hospital somewhere that says, yeah, we don't care about our patients, whatever. We're just here to move gurneys around. Everybody says that. Like, I've worked with pharma and they all say, yeah, we're innovative and we're trying to save the world. Like, yeah, that's what the job is. You have to get beyond that, because if everybody's saying that, it's not meaningfully interesting or different. There's no way someone makes a choice. So once you kind of scrape past that stuff and figure out what makes you unique, you have to start to spell it out and make it more granular. So if a company X says, we're all about, pick it, whatever it is, work-life balance, status, prestige, ethics, gender equality, I don't care. It's any number of things. Once you say it, that's great. Stick a poster on the wall and call it a day. Oh, wait, that's never going to work. What you have to do is turn it into messaging that makes it real, right? Stories are real. Taglines aren't real. Stories are real. I knew a person who did this. I knew why that happened. I understand all the backstory around that stuff. The reason why we all think of Nordstrom's as the #1 customer service place is because someone once tried to exchange a product that Nordstrom never sold, and Nordstrom took the return. That is a story. It's a teeny story, but it is a story that everybody goes, I remember that story. I've heard that story. It's a story that's shared. It's a story that's passed around. It's real. And it gets granular. It gets meaningfully different, that you can tell that story in your company to say, what does it sound like to your data scientists? What does it sound like to your coders? What does it sound like to your salespeople? What does it sound like to your HR people? What does it sound like to da-da-da-da? And you tell those stories to make it real. So your messaging starts at a core concept, but that's just an idea. It's just an amorphous kind of thing. It's a nice to have. It's a North Star that you can't touch. Turning it into something you can touch, turning it into something that sounds like something a human does, is where you really get started.
Yeah, and I would kind of add that those stories can be synonymous with, or basically be explained as proof points. Right. So you have this feeling that James is talking about, what it's like to be there, what it's like to live there, work there, from the inside and the outside. And a way to look at what James is talking about in terms of telling stories is, how do you prove to the world that what it feels like, or what you want the world to think it feels like, how do you prove that it does? And I think that's kind of what James is saying. I'll also add, and I'll take a bit of a different angle than James. I think complements it quite well, which is I actually, in an effort to keep things very simple but deep in terms of messaging, which I believe this question was about, is I like to use a very brief model called the golden circle. Quickly by a raise of hands, and you can, how do you raise your hand in here? Adrian, can you explain to everybody how to raise their hand? I'm just curious if we can see by a raise of hand who here has heard of Simon Sinek's golden circle. Just real quick.
I'm not sure. I think on the bottom of your screen you can. I see some people are starting to do it. You might be able to click it on the bottom of your video.
Yeah, so I can't. Oh, now I can see. Okay, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I see
a good amount of people, actually, yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
All right, cool. So for those of you who have heard of it, bear with me. I'll explain it for 2 seconds. And Adrian, I think you have the visual, right? Yeah. So this is basically what Simon Sinek talks about. Great TED Talk. There's a 5-minute version, an 18-minute version, if you want to Google it. He's a world-renowned marketer and advertiser and consultant. And essentially, he explains the golden circle more in marketing in general and branding in general. I basically use it for employer branding and recruitment marketing and messaging that way. And essentially, what he explains is that similar to what James was saying about like a hospital that says, we care for our patients. That's like what every hospital does, right? So instead of talking about the what, which is at the bottom, which is how a lot of companies will try to attract people as they talk about the career opportunity, or even more simply, and not a great idea, just a job, right? Just putting out job postings and advertising and say, hey, we have this job open, we have this job open, we have the job open. That's talking about the what, right? The quote unquote product that you're trying to sell. That's how some companies do it. But the best companies, according to Simon Sinek, and I would say that this strategy worked for me, they actually rarely talk about the what, and they spend most of their messaging on the why. So your brand essence, in this case, it would be your employer brand essence. And using that as kind of the filter, the lens that all your content is kind of told through. And then also the how, right? So how is business done? How do people behave? So that's like the culture. What's your tech stack look like? What are the people like? What are your values, your employer value proposition, which is, and I'm sure James can expand on this, is different than your employer brand, right? Those are the things that you're promising to people that work at your company. How do you interact with your customers, et cetera, et cetera. So I usually focus on the why and the how, and only after, maybe with the right audience and messaging really specifically to that niche, then maybe I will drop in the what if we need to really build pipeline or boost job applications or whatever it is. But you'll rarely hear from the work I do with clients. You'll rarely hear about like the actual like job posting. What people do in the job is really valuable. That's a how. But the actual job posting and all that stuff is rarely talked about when I build strategy.
Yeah, because that's the recruiter's job, to kind of take this conceptual idea of what your brand is and make it real to that candidate right there in front of them, to make it say, look, if you're going to be a nurse or you're going to be an electrician or you're going to be a whatever the heck it is, what does all this conceptual stuff mean to you? And connecting that dot is really a big part of their job, which is why recruiters and employer brands really should work together more and better. And that's probably a whole other set of webinars we could probably do, but, and because I know that that's always a challenge, because those are two, it's like sales and marketing don't ever get along. Well, same thing here. I would say though, that, in a lot of ways, the EVP ends up being that North Star, that idea of is offering. Some people, that offering is a deeper why. We've been trained for years that millennials, those crazy kids who are now 36 years old, that these crazy kids, all they care about is purpose, all they care about is meaning. And while statistically that's true, all 22-year-olds won't care about meaning and purpose. And every 21-year-old gets out of college and says, I'm going to change the world. My dad thought that. He's old, but that explains why he wore the hippie clothes. He wanted to change the world. So whatever. the thing is that beyond that, some people don't care about the purpose at that level. Some people care about prestige, right? People who work at a hedge fund are probably driven not by the urge to save the world or save the whales or save the trees or save anything. They're there to make a pile of cash, and good for them, because I'm not here to begrudge anybody, wanting to make money. People don't go to Red Cross to make a lot of money. They have a purpose. So you have to define what that thing is, and then you kind of bolster it with all the you're right, the tech stack, all the ancillary materials, the collateral, the supporting evidence that says this claim we make is actually true, and we can prove it 700 ways. And then, of course, you've got to glue on all the stuff about, how do you get staff to talk about that stuff? How do you make sure that when staff talks about what it's like to work there, it aligns to that EVP, that core idea, but you get to translate it to their language, which is really what a candidate wants. No one cares about market. They want to know the real story.
Yeah, and that's actually a great way to actually address John's question. So John asked, can you talk about post-COVID messaging? He says, it seems like every company is taking the same approach. And that's like, John, you basically answered your own question in a way. And we'll pick it apart and dive in a little bit. Basically, the first thing I would tell any company if they're messaging about COVID-19 is 1, be careful. 2, don't overdo it. And 3, it better be authentic and real. If a company is just saying, like, putting out pictures of people working from home and those people are actually miserable because their health insurance is shit, and they're struggling,
terrified,
mentally, or scared, like, that's not good. Then just don't message at all, right? Like, if your employee base is not adapting well or is under extreme stress or pressure, so on and so forth, don't message about it. It's better not to than to fake it, and do anything that's inauthentic. That goes for all content, in my opinion. However, with COVID, it's extraordinarily sensitive and thus extremely risky. You're walking around landmines. So, John, you're absolutely right. A lot of companies do seem to be doing the same, which is a risk. If what they're saying is authentic to them, the risk isn't that big, right? Then it just kind of looks like what you're saying, John. It looks like everybody's doing the same thing. That's not as bad as this one company looks like they're totally, like, blowing it out their ass and, being full of shit and all that stuff. So I would just say, be careful, be thoughtful. And if there's not whole lot of really good, authentic stuff happening right now that you can pull and talk about, then plan something for the longer term, right? Like see how things are evolving and make note of those things. And then maybe at the end of this, whenever that is, or later on when it does feel appropriate, when you've really gotten your thoughts together and feel like there's less of a risk, that's a good time to do it too. So just be careful is what I'd say, which is probably pretty obvious. But one of the more important points is, if you don't have anything good, don't share anything about it. Just stay away.
You know how there's that stages of grief, there's the denial, anger, and I think there's a whole kind of set of stages of us coping with COVID, right? There was the week 1, it's crazy working from home. Oh, look, it's a Zoom background that does goofy things. Like we're just kind of trying to laugh through this process, and we're kind of hoping maybe this only lasts a couple weeks, and maybe this is just going to be a quickie. We can hold our breath through it. And then like week 2 or 3, you kind of went, all right, this is real. This is happening. And then week 4 and 5, when I think at the end of week 3 is when we hit what I refer to as peak inspiration. The Marriott videos started coming out, all these videos about how we're going to help, we're going to do what I can, we're going to sacrifice, which is great, which is all valid, and everything that Raf said is 100% right. It has to be authentic. But I think we've hit peak inspiration, right? Inspiration is kind of it's too sweet chocolate. It's nice in little bits. It's nice now and then, but you can't live on it. And I think we're moving now towards what happens after the inspiration. And it's about, what does it mean to work here? What does it mean to get the work done? And it doesn't matter where you're talking about. It doesn't matter if you're working at home or you have to go to an essential job of some sort. What does it mean to work here? So the COVID underlines a lot of these ideas because, and here's the unstated truth, I think, employer brand is the absolute go-to PR crisis move. When the brand hits the rocks and something bad happens, let's wheel out the staff, because let's let their shiny, happy faces overshadow the thing the CEO did, right? You got a pizza company and you said some very interesting, complicated things about particular players on the football field. Let's get rid of that, dude. Let's bring in the people who make the pizza. Let's bring in the people who own the franchises. You run a bank and made a bunch of fake accounts. Let's get rid of the marketing. Let's bring in the tellers. Hey, smiley people, they're doing a job. Employer brand has always been the go-to PR move for crisis, and we'll welcome to the world's biggest crisis. So everybody is leaning hard on, this is our people, this is what we're doing. So I'm not shocked at all. The question is, what happens after that? What happens once you get past the inspiration, you kind of redefine what your brand is and who it is for? That stuff didn't change. It just kind of got amplified because suddenly everybody cares. Here's a story I hope I can share. So there's a friend of mine who works in a very large regional grocery chain. I won't name the name because everybody knows who it is. It's down south. And they said, suddenly where marketing used to be like, yeah, whatever, marketing is all over them saying, how can we help? How can we help? How can we help? Because marketing realizes pushing coupons and COVID ain't going to work. But talking about the people who work here, leading on some inspiration, learning on some personal stories, plays like crazy. So the question is, what happens once things calm down? How do you leverage that for your employer brand? And how do you leverage the relationship with marketing for your employer brand?
Right. Yeah, we will get through. This will be over eventually.
One day.
So, all the messaging has to do. I just want to address Teresa, if that's okay, Adrian and Lori, because she asked a couple questions. So Teresa, your first question was some creative ways to launch a brand, right? Unfortunately, we do not have enough time to talk about that. And one is because I would have to ask you a ton of follow-up questions or get into a very specific example that may not be appropriate. Adrian, yep.
I also want to jump in and say that that's what our Zoomside chat next week is about, right? It's about activating your messaging. So we're jumping into that next week.
Page and Captain Segue.
So Teresa, apologies, we won't answer that one today. Obviously, we can set up time privately later if you're interested. But I'll answer your second question, and James, I'm sure can add some too, which is, what are some tactical ways to cultivate the stories if you aren't in PR or editorial savvy? So I think there's two parts to this question, which is one, how do you get the stories? And two, how do you tell them? How to get them? I would say being PR editorial savvy would help, but I don't think it's that necessary in terms of capturing them, right? Yes, what I would do or encourage someone to do is pretend they're a journalist and go out and talk to people, right? Both in individual settings and group settings. And that's, there's a whole strategy, especially from Universum, they do this really well. There's a whole project around that and how to do that and all that stuff, which we won't go into the details, but basically talking to your people and also seeing, what they're saying without you talking to them. So if your company uses Slack, go to the culture channel or whatever other channels there are that a lot of people participate in, and see what you can read from there. And that could lead you down certain paths of, talking to certain people, whatever. If it's email, see what leaders are sending over email and what people joke about and stuff and all that. In terms of writing the stories or telling the stories, which may be a little bit closer to your question, if you are not PR editorial savvy, as you're saying, Teresa, there are plenty of low-cost contractors out there, Fiverr.com, and obviously these people need work and are usually quite good. So that's always an option. Otherwise, if you're not a good writer, focus on podcasts and video, right? If you're not good at producing video, there are some really great low-cost monthly subscription platforms that give you the tools, drag and drop and simple stuff that allow you to create really beautiful videos or more brand centric videos or more branded that look really professional rather than, raw. But raw is also really good if you do it right. So I hope that helps, Teresa. James, I'm sure you have something to add.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I took over at Groupon, we took exactly that same approach. And I looked at Groupon's a pretty big company, 6,000 people at the time, and they had data scientists and programmers and salespeople and all these different things that I'm like, like logistics, the level of logistics they understood, I couldn't conceive of. And so when we did an article, we did exactly what we talked about. We sat down, we interviewed them, we took our notes back, we read them, we looked at them, and I went, I don't think I quite understood exactly the technical detail. You wrote it up, you handed it back to the person, say, was this right? Did I mess this up? They made some edits. You went back and forth a couple times. You dropped it into a site, whatever. It took 10, 12, sometimes 15 hours to put a piece of content together. And when you start to think about content as 10, 12 hours, you kind of shy away of it. Or worse yet, you say it's a thing I only do once every month or two. I think that's a approach. I don't think that has to be the approach. And I think on some level, when you put a PR or journalism spin on it, you lose a little of that rough, raw edge that you were referring to. So what we ended up doing is we built a Google form that was a survey question, set of survey questions, things like, what does your mom think you do all day? You know, goofy stuff, but also serious stuff. What's the best advice you ever got from a boss? You know, how many different roles have you had here? You know, and we understood what our brand was. We knew we couldn't just ask any old question that got a laugh. It was about how do we write questions that led them to tell stories in their own words, in their own little paragraph to say, this is this, and it illustrates and it highlights the brand I'm trying to get them to. That's a Google form, so it's free and that's easy. And you push that URL out to people. There's a whole strategy of doing that. And as you collected it, you turned it into testimonials or you turned it into profiles. And that with a picture from your phone, it was a very quick way. And so we ended up, once we really got that machine running, and by the way, I will not downplay how much time it takes to get a machine like that running. But if you think like a content marketer and not like a journalist, you can put content every 45 minutes. And so once you do that, you start to realize if I have to choice between one big piece of content every month or two, I'm very limited in the stories I can tell because I need to tell a story that appeals to as many people as possible, right? It's kind of like, you know, sitcoms in the 80s where we only had 3 channels, so you had to appeal to as many people as possible. Now, if I'm pushing out stories anytime I feel like it, it's really easy. In fact, I have hundreds at my disposal. I can tell super niche stories that are specifically interested to African-American women data scientists. And I know that no one else is going to care about this story, but man, this story kills and it's going to resonate with that particular audience. And it took no more time than writing the big story. So there are ways of approaching it, but I would recommend what I would refer to as a content marketing approach to those stories. That said, stories are everywhere. They are everywhere. You simply have to start looking for them.
Hey, Lori, do you want to take Samantha's question?
Let me look at Samantha's question here. Chat. Well, thank you, Adrian, for handling. I was having some Wi-Fi issues, so thank you for jumping in on the questions. We will get to more questions, but I do also want to stay on the topic as well so that we move through. I'm also seeing a lot of questions that are more like starting with the discovery phase. So I do encourage people to go back and listen to last week's. I think a lot of those questions may get answered in that session. But, you know, we talked a little bit, Raf, you mentioned a little bit about authenticity and responding to COVID and messaging. Back to the more, you know, high level topic of messaging, you know, for your employer brand. How important is it in determining word choice and what that messaging looks like? How important is it to be authentic and for it to resonate with your existing employees? And what happens if it doesn't? Who you're trying to, you know, position yourself as, what happens when that doesn't exactly look the same as what's going on inside?
Yeah, so this is, I'll be able to answer this pretty quickly. So if it's not authentic, people will feel it. I'm sure everybody here can tell if they're looking at a stock photo or a regular, although they're getting better, I have to say. But people can feel it. So don't try to whitewash or greenwash or anything like that because people will feel it. And then if you're really good at using stock imagery or telling stories that are not authentic but feel authentic, because there's certainly people that are skilled that way, and I don't mean in a bad way, they're just good at telling stories and you know, enhancing things. Be ready or if you're telling stories that may be outdated or things like that, if things have changed, no surprise, if somebody joins the company based on that and they figure out it's not the case, your attrition rates and your costs and training and all that stuff will go through the roof. And I don't know who will get, it depends on what company you're at, who will get the axe, but somebody will come looking for your head, or the head recruiter's head, or head of talent management. Somebody is going to pay the price. If external talent sees your company one way, and when they become internal talent, feel it completely different, especially at the beginning, they will feel that buyer's remorse very, very quickly. And you know, when an employee starts at a company, and Laura and I built the orientation program at our last company, that first impression is really important. And if it feels anything off, of what they felt before they joined, the rate, that the probability or the chances of them churning out within 6 months or a year, or within 45 days even, is going to be significantly higher. So that's the risk. Pretty simple. Yeah.
Yeah, you end up looking schizophrenic. We tell everybody we're this, but in reality, we're that. It's like if you've been on a date and you get that picture on whatever platform you're going to look at pictures on, whatever, hey, no judgment. And they look like this, and you show up to the restaurant and they look like that. And you're like, yeah, this date isn't going to work out. And it's like, if you felt the need to lie, you clearly don't believe in yourself enough for me to believe in you. And if you don't know how to express who you are, that's fine. And I think the trick is not to try and pretend to be perfect, all positive, all spin, all inspiration, all the time. I'm a big believer that every job posting should have the paragraph, "This is why you'll hate this job," because I want to know ahead of time, because it makes it feel more authentic. For example, if you put a pillar out there, if you put a claim out there that we're all here for innovation, but then you force me to go through your 4,000-year-old ATS, how really innovative are you exactly? I mean, you have to live and breathe that thing. And if I don't see it, I don't believe it. If I tell you I'm funny and you're not laughing, am I funny? It's just, you have to kind of be part of it. But at the same time, you have to be able to show these are the negatives. Hey, look, we're innovative, which means we run fast. We don't always know where we're going. It's a little chaotic. What's the other side of this wonderful positive claim that you're making? What's the edge, so to speak, of that ideal? The more you define the edges, the more believable the claim gets and the more people understand what it is. So, here's another one. Every company says we respect our people, or we want to encourage our people to bring their whole selves to work. I don't believe that for half a second. I don't believe any company is totally cool with me showing up in my shorts just because that's who I am. That's what I'm doing. No, you want me to dress like a professional to some extent. You want me to show up and do my work. You don't want me to say, you know what, it's Wednesday, I don't feel like working. That's my whole self. What? You want to be professional. So I don't believe in that stuff. Now, if they said, we want you to bring your whole self to the work, and this is what we mean, and this is the limits of what that looks like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand it, and you're infinitely more believable because of it.
Well said. Lori, should I answer some of these questions, or do you want to?
Yeah, let's get through. I've seen some good ones. Like,
Rebecca asked a good one. Can I answer that one? Is that right?
Yes, please.
So Rebecca McCormick, thanks for the question, asked, when starting from scratch, which I know a lot of people are, do you recommend building a ground up social presence or leveraging the corporate social feeds to get in front of the consumer eyes? To me, it really depends, which is the worst answer ever, but it really does to your situation. So one of the things that it depends on, which kind of coincides with Krista's question about when companies should start investing in employer brand or hiring someone or a team dedicated to employer brand. So Krista, I would say as early as possible. I mean, it's what's more important than the people in your company and bringing in great people. I can find another answer or something more important. So I would say from the beginning, which also will give that company a very strong competitive advantage, because even the most developed companies, some of them in the world, do not have somebody leading employer branding. So do it early and do it smart. And to come back to the question of starting from scratch, so say you have somebody leading it, if that person, it depends on that person's relationship or standing with mostly probably the marketing team and people in branding. So if the marketing team is snobby and doesn't give a crap about employer brand and doesn't take it seriously, which sadly I've seen a lot of, then you're more or less on your own. And that's where I would say screw the corporate social feed and really do the ground up, do it yourself. Or do it with a team that does get it and believe in it. And, then you can have parallel paths. If your marketing leadership is awesome and cool and gets it, like understands how important it is to bring in people, and that marketing is not just, and that there's no, ironclad rule that says marketing can only and should only be used to drive revenue, which hiring does also, by the way, but, or pipeline for sales. If they get it, then I'd partner with them and see what from the corporate social feeds you can leverage and what resources from the marketing team you can leverage to help build your stories and build your presence and build the employer brand. So it really does depend. Rebecca. So I hope that's helpful. And I know it's not black and white.
Yeah, I look at the opportunity that marketing doesn't care about it. That's a gift. Man, it's more work for you, but you get to own that thing. You get to really embrace it and say, this is how I want to do it. When marketing gets involved, and I love some marketers, I'm a born marketer for whatever you want to believe that, they have a very particular way of looking at things. They look at things in a more perspective. They want more leads. They want more eyeballs. They want more share of voice. They want more engagement. They want more budgets, more eyeballs, everything more. And you want quality. And quality and more are not the same. And so when marketing gets involved, it takes a very more mindset, quantity mindset, and applies it to employer brand. And it doesn't really quite work. It's really trying to jam a round peg in a square hole. It doesn't quite fit. And you can pound it through and get some good work out of it. But if it's just on you, you can really focus on what matters, and that's that quality level. It's not about appealing to 1 million job applicants. It's about appealing to one perfect, amazing candidate who wants to fall in love with you now. That's really where the value is. But yes, and to the earlier question, when do you start? Well, first off, you already did. The trick is your employer brand already exists. It's already there. It's just sitting there. The question is, how intentional do you want to be in managing it? Now, let's name drop here. Google did not have to invest in its employer brand for about 20 years. Why? Because it was Google and everybody knew it. And everybody at Google told wonderful stories about free M&Ms and the coffee and the lunches and the vans that took you to work and all these wonderful perks, which is not a brand, but that's a separate conversation. And everybody went, oh, cool, I want to work there. So they didn't have to worry about it. Their employer brand was plenty positive. And at some point, things changed. I'm not saying bad or worse. It's simply saying they evolve. Exactly, it evolves. And at which point they say, okay, we're going to take some ownership of this and be intentional about it. Your startup, same kind of process. It already exists. The question is it a problem for you to figure out, or is it good enough for you to coast by for a little bit? Now, I'm going to go ahead and suggest that everybody listening on this pod or this little webinar would go, yeah, do it now. But may not be perfectly exactly right for everybody.
Yeah, and I'll actually tie what you're talking about to what Lisa asked, and Lisa Dan asked my favorite question to answer, and you'll see, I'll answer this really quickly. But she asked, what is the best practice for overcoming negative brand comments, for example, like Glassdoor, that only illustrate the negative? My team members have posted positive reviews and they are attacked on the platform and state that they are fake reviews. So obviously there's some sort of like...
how can there be fake reviews? A person wrote it, whether it's a leader or a recruiter. You can't discount that they actually work there too. Okay, moving on. Sorry.
I think Lisa probably means maybe inauthentic
I get it, but still.
Added.
Whitewashed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason this is one of my favorite questions is because I was asked it a lot in my last company and where I worked before. And on the one hand, you can do your best to control the story or influence the story off of, for example, Glassdoor. And by being relatively aggressive about, and extremely authentic, of course, of, messaging around your employer brand, right? So I would say if you have really terrible reviews, you need to, or you could, if you want, step on the gas a little bit with really a lot of positivity and really good stories. However, I will caveat that with saying the only way to really cover tracks for bad Glassdoor reviews is for the company to treat their employees better. There will always be disgruntled people. There's no question. You can't make everybody happy. But the signal that Glassdoor sends should not be we need to invest in employer branding. The signal that Glassdoor sends should be we need to invest in our people. And I know that's a separate conversation, Lisa, so I apologize if the answer is not completely direct to what your ability to solve is. But that is what I pushed back to leadership at my last company when they said, our Glassdoor reviews seem like they might be decreasing. And it was because, things had changed a bit. And they said, what can you do? And I said, why are you asking me? I lead employer branding. I have nothing to do with Glassdoor reviews. You want Glassdoor reviews to go up or stop going down? Treat your employees better. Very, very simple. But yeah.
Can I quibble just a little bit?
Yeah.
The underlying truth there is I can't break that down. But on top of that is this idea that I think while Glassdoor spent a lot of time trying to convince everybody that their score is your employer brand, which of course is not true at all. What the score actually ends up being is a score and a function of your recruiting team. So if I tell everybody who walks in the door, this is an amazing place to work. There's going to be there's a puppy cuddle pile every Thursday. It's free ice cream every Tuesday. It's amazing. Everybody's super happy. And people go, oh, cool. I want to work here because that sounds amazing. And you show up and there's a puppy cuddle pile only every other Thursday. And there's not as much ice cream, and they run out of ice cream fast. People get mad. It's the problem is recruiters are responsible in a lot of ways for setting the expectations of what the work is going to be. And when the company doesn't meet those expectations, you're going to get a bad score. Now, should the company make the company better? Absolutely. But I think a lot of it because recruiters are incentivized to just bring the butt in, to put it in the seat, to make it happen, to say whatever it needs to say to make it happen. So what I would think another strategy or an additional strategy, because yes, making the company better, 100% right, is to figure out how to reframe what's being talked about. So if you talk, I've seen companies where it's like, this place is chaotic. I never know what's going to happen one day or the next. I keep getting new bosses. My projects keep getting shifted. It's a horrible place to work. Because you know what? That sounds horrible. Framed as it's chaos and I have no idea what's going on sounds horrible. For some people, dynamic, you have the opportunity to kind of make your own path because no one's going to stand in your way. That sounds fantastic. So if you reframe it as a positive, and this, I'm just not trying to whitewash. I'm not trying to blow sunshine up anybody's, not nether regions. It's really just about, you have to frame it appropriately. Think about the person who goes to the post office and says, this place is slow. This place is bureaucratic. This place is boring. This place is staid. And at Friday, it's, it's all over. This is horrible. I can't make any change here. Well, yeah, it's the post office. But there are people there who go, what I want is a work-life balance, stability, and they think it's a dream job. It's really about how do you reframe the purpose of the job, the purpose of the company, the brand of the company to suit. And I think if you simply say to someone on a Glassdoor, post, and this place is
Did everybody else lose James?
Yeah, I think we might have lost him for a
we're hoping for everybody else.
Hey, James, we lost you for a sec. Can you repeat maybe the last 5 seconds?
Sure. So, I don't even know what the heck I said. That's not my job to remember what I said. My goodness, it's just a stream. No, but here's the best example. Here's the best example. And I'm not name dropping, even though I am. You all remember the article that came out about Amazon, that everybody's crying at their desks. Everybody's incredibly brutal. Everybody's mean all the time. Everything's rough. And I talked to people who work there and I said, how true are the best work possible? We want to be pushed. We want that. And it's the people who thought it would be all fun and games who are crying at their desk who didn't realize that's what they're getting. So it's the frame you put around that idea is what you need to shift a little bit.
Thank you. So really there's some really great questions coming in more. I definitely want to touch on, because we're already on that topic, but can you use employer brand strategy to shift, we know we're here, right? We know this is how we're perceived today. And we know this is really the company we want to be. This is our values, our culture, our purpose for being in the world. How do you get from A to B? Like, how do you get from where you are today and shift that?
If you want to. Yeah, everything we've said so far is 100% true. It's about what is authentic, what's real, who are you, what do you care about? I think the problem with the question is that it assumes you are trying to be, we've all seen those companies that say amazing place to work, right? They want to label themselves as an amazing place to work. The problem is it's half a sentence, because it's an amazing place to work for whom, in what capacity, in what way, right? The person who's happy at Facebook is not going to be happy at Goldman Sachs and vice versa, right? They're very wonderful places to work. I'm sure they're just for certain people. So if you can tie who you're going to be great for and illustrate that, you're in a better spot. So let's say your brand is negative. That may be a function, again, of poor expectations coming in. It may be a function of poor leadership in the past that you're trying to solve for. If you have solved for it, and again, it's not about changing if the foundation is good, you simply have to tell the stories about it. And it takes time to say, this is what the story is, and get that story to travel and get people to believe it, which means you do have to do it on a semi-regular basis. You do actually have to, and this is a phrase we all have said and heard a million times, live the brand and really be the brand and show it this is what it's like. Because again, if it's negative and you're trying to spin it or that's never going to work. It's simply a matter of saying, look, we're repositioning, we're showing where we fixed things, where we've changed things and the direction we're heading. And here are stories that buttress that idea and show that we mean it. That's a strategy, but it depends on what the root cause of what the problem is first.
Yeah.
Raf, do you want to add to that, or do you want to touch on Emily's question? She said,
James is really thorough. So let me switch to.
That is the best backhanded compliment I've ever had that I'm allowed.
No,
I love it. I love it.
You're saving me time. It's great. How do you, so Emily was asking, how do you talk about a specific type of person that would fit well in your company without being discriminatory? Really good question, and probably a very complex answer and a whole lot of different perspectives that can give you, thank you, Adrian, values it. A lot of people have different opinions on it, so I'll give you mine. I'm sure James will give his as well. I would probably stay away from talking about a specific type of person that would fit in well. And that's really trying to not exclude anybody, to your point, Emily. Discriminatory, I think, means similar to exclusive, right? So to be more inclusive, it's actually more about not being exclusive rather than focusing on being inclusive. So I would just probably stay away from getting that specific and let people kind of get there on their own. So kind of like what James was talking about before, if somebody loves like chaos and that's where they thrive, then they will get that through, if you're doing a good job messaging, they'll just understand, they'll deduce it from what they're seeing, and they'll understand, this is chaotic, it's great for me, or this is chaotic and no chance, right? So I think if you do the messaging right, the why and the how, it will do that for you. And I always used to tell clients this when I worked at LinkedIn and also, where I worked last, is that it's not about, employer branding and recruitment marketing and, getting out there and social media for, recruiting. It's not about significantly increasing your applications or your pipeline necessarily. It's really about getting the right people in and keeping the wrong people out. So again, if you're communicating your why and your how really well, it will push out the people that don't fit. And I know culture fit is like a contentious term these days, but I think I know what you're saying, Emily, like who's going to arrive, feel good, and perform well. It's going to be the people that feel included through your content, and in a good way, you'll exclude the people that don't. And a lot of companies or employer branding people or whoever's trying to do this activity because they're either assigned to it or a job was actually created. And I want to give love to Randy and the other marketers on here that are showing deep interest in this, and to eliminate any negative feelings we had before. But basically, if you communicate properly or well and specifically, it will do it for you.
Yeah, and I think Emily's follow-up question about how do you get people to understand who they are so that you can create that match or that culture ad, which I think I prefer as a term, but whatever. Again, this isn't that conversation. And that's tough. That's 100%. It's such a tough question. I am guilty of falling in love with a brand that I thought was who I wanted to be. And it turns out I wasn't that person. And it takes getting your ass kicked, and it takes taking that job and kind of diluting yourself a little bit to get in there and say, no, I definitely am that kind of person. And then getting your butt kicked and having to leave, that you're like, okay, yeah, I learned something about myself. And that's always going to be a danger. And that's really where some of those places like, they want to do personality tests and assessments, and they try to get at that. I quibble. I have issues with some of that stuff. We're not going to get into that, but you're right. It is an absolutely hard question. And that's, it's hard to kind of make sure people understand what you're getting into. All you can say is, this is who we are, as unvarnished, as real as you can be, and say, look, we're totally cool if you don't love us. That is totally fine. You know, we don't need a million significant others. We just need a handful of people who love us for what we are. That's kind of the approach you have to take, and then hope that they get who they are too. It is a balancing act. So it's an unsolvable riddle.
Hey, Lori, can we talk a little bit about job descriptions?
Yeah, because I'm seeing a lot of, I think that would make good sense.
Who was the one that asked that? I just want to make sure they get credit for the question. I want to read the question. Where is it?
Randy said something about job postings.
Having a good MVP in using that language in the job postings, making sure.
Yeah, so somebody else earlier asked about job descriptions, and like I think it was something around how do you write job descriptions that enhance, tell the employer branding story in that sense. Whoever that was, sorry, I'm trying to scroll up and find you, but thank you for the question, and it's a great one. And actually, it was like my favorite, one of my favorite topics to talk about when I worked at LinkedIn and I must have talked to hundreds of TA teams and leaders. And, they would oftentimes ask, like, where do I start? And, this isn't necessarily where you have to start, but it is an interesting place to evaluate.
Impact, high impact, high drama, low cost. Absolutely.
Totally. And the way that I think about it and try to explain, and I know the marketing people on the call will really understand this, and I assume the HR people as well. But a job description is language on a page, right? Whether it's a piece of paper or a web page or whatever. To me, that means it's content, literally, right? And while a lot of companies still use the bullet points and very basic stuff, and even tell a story at the top, my question to them is, are you treating this as a piece of content marketing, right? Or can you think about it as a piece of content marketing, just like a marketer would in terms of trying to drive conversion, right? You are trying to drive conversion, but you're also trying to keep the not right fit out. So yeah, I mean, it's really powerful to do it. To do it the right way is not easy. James, you might have some examples of companies that have done job descriptions really well.
Yeah. I have follow personally because I think it's, look, there, and I mentioned Katrina Kibben in the chat. You want an A+ job posting? That's who I would go to. She's the queen. She knows this better than anybody.
Yeah.
However, they're not cheap and they're not fast. But if you want inexpensive and fast and get yourself to an immediate B+, which by the way is probably 3 or 4 levels over where you are right now, you follow a model which is really simple. You have a paragraph that talks about your company and the change it's trying to make in the world. You have a paragraph about the team and how it helps the company. You have a paragraph about the role and how it helps the team. So you're creating a direct line of how one person impacts the larger scope of work. You have a paragraph about the culture, whether it's the office or the team, you decide. And then you have bullet points around this is what your day looks like, and this is who we'd like to talk to you if. The trick is, if you have lots of different recruiters and lots of different HRBPs writing these things, it's going to sound like chaos. You're 100% right. These are marketing materials. These are not legal documents. Job descriptions are legal documents. Job postings are marketing materials, which means you don't have to be 100% inclusive. You don't have to be comprehensive. You don't have to be must be able to lift 50 pounds unless that's legally necessary, right? There's elements, but marketing is marketing. Don't lie, right? Just like any good marketing, but you don't have to be completely comprehensive. What I would say is the trick to getting all these different people who write job postings on the same page to create alignment is, as the employer brand owner, create your own lexicon, create your own dictionary of, let's call it 20 words, maybe 25 words of things and terms you use over and over and over again, right? If I told you move fast and break things, you immediately went Facebook, right? There are phrases that kind of embed, and Textio did a great study on this stuff to say that Netflix says these certain terms over and over again, Microsoft says these terms over and over again, and because they intentionally say them over and over again, they're telling you what their brand is. At the same time, it allows individual writers to speak in a voice that is unique and human without sounding like a bunch of parrots, apply here, apply here, apply here. I want a cracker. You know, that stuff, that same language over and over again doesn't play. It allows people to do it in the right word. But by seeding specific words or terms throughout all that stuff, you create an alignment against that. So if someone sees this job posting and that job posting, even though they're written by different people at different stages at different jobs, they still feels like the same company, which is intentional. And as the person who's choosing those words, you're choosing the words that support the brand. So it's a way of, and by the way, that's not just for job postings, that's everywhere, every social post, every job, every career site, every Glassdoor response, use them over and over and over again to create alignment.
Yep.
Yeah, we could connect that actually to the golden circle exercise, right? So, you know, the phrase that you keep hearing, so Apple, think different, right? Facebook, break stuff, you know, whatever. That's their why from, you know, partially, right? So you can come up with a list of words that fit into the why and the how, and then apply them, like James is saying, in, you know, certain order or whatever, into your job postings. And you can, I'll end with this, you can even think about each job posting as a mini career page for each job, right? So your career page will likely have, you know, the headline, which is not your employer brand, but it's a tagline that represents your why and maybe your how. And then, you know, all the things underneath are your hows, your proof points, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, you could think about writing each job description specific to that job, like you're writing a full career page. That might help some people think about the formatting and a way to basically tell the story, because that's what a career page does, is tells the story of your EVP, your brand, like that kind of stuff.
All content marketing.
Yeah.
We're in the last 5 minutes. I just want to remind everyone who's still on the call, we have the third part of this employer brand series next Thursday at noon Eastern time. We are going to be, this is the most fun of the three, in my opinion. We're really going to be digging in on bold, exciting campaigns, amplifying that brand. Once you have all the words and the messaging down, what fun things, exciting events, and great campaigns can you do with that messaging? And I want to take out this conversation on this last point here. How important is it to have an elevator pitch that everyone internally knows, and that is something that you can kind of hitch your employer brand to, or that you can start really having everybody internally, at the bare minimum, explaining the company in the right way and in the same way?
I cringe at elevator speeches and elevator pitches. I think elevator presentations and elevator pitches presume that you only have the 30 seconds and that you have to jam it all in there at once. And you have to stick as many of those words you have to. And I think, much like the cover of a book, much like the header of the subject line of an email, of the title of a good clickbaity piece, the job of that is to get someone to say, huh, that's interesting, I want to learn more. So whatever you say should be that, so long as when they say, I want to learn more, it's directing to pieces that you have a little more control over, the job postings, the career sites, the social content, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't love elevator pitches, but there are plenty of times when it makes sense. So I think I'm not going to say they're horrible. I'm not going to say they're bad. I'm just saying I cringe at that, because I think that there are other ways of approaching it. They're trying to jam it in. It's not going to get you where you want to go.
I don't disagree, but
go. Do it. We have exactly 3 minutes. Beat me up.
I don't disagree. So I think you're more or less, you know, I'm in the same mindset.
Oh, good. Lori's going to shave her head too. That's fantastic.
John, thank you for the comment. That's really funny. Yeah.
Well, no, we're at the end here. If anybody else on the line has any additional questions that are very quick, otherwise feel free. Adrian has posted all of our contact information, our LinkedIn's, our emails. Feel free to reach out to any one of us individually for deeper, detailed information on the topics we've already talked about. And again, please do join us next week. I'm really excited. We're all going to shave our heads, apparently. So that might be even more interesting.
I'm thinking about it too.
We're trying to keep things light and yeah, a little bit of levity nowadays. So any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. And I wanted to thank, James and Rafael, as always, for your participation. Wonderful content, really great information, and thank you, everyone who's on the line. Thank you for everyone who joined us, all our attendees. Please do join us next week. We're going to really take this to the next level and talk about all the fun and bold, exciting things we can do now.
Yeah, and any specific questions, follow-ups, you guys want to work together with either me or James, just email
And
us.
invite colleagues, peers, you know, post this. Everybody seems to be enjoying the content. We want to get as many people on as we can. So
Thank you, Nathan. That's very kind of you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. We'll
Thank
send an
you all.
email out with the LinkedIn's to all of our panelists so you can contact them later, okay?
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Should
you
get a
all.
LinkedIn profile then. I should get one of those. Is that what you're saying? Okay, cool.
Bye.